So when I was a kid, I loved Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I know that sounds a little bit strange. There were a lot of different themes and a lot of different scenes that at the time didn't quite make sense. Now why I mention this is much older, when I was probably about 15, 16 years old, I decided to finally watch The Terminator, the first one. I was just like, oh, that's where the picture came from, or that's where the chip came from. Certain things that didn't quite make a whole lot of sense in the second movie started to make a lot more sense after I watched the first one. And that can be seen here. And let's dive into Act 2, the meaning of and all things regarding misleading. I've been going back and listening and reviewing each of the Deer Hunter's previous albums leading up to part 5, and here we come to part 2. Part 2 is a little bit longer than the first one of part 1, and what I like about part 2 is some of the more playing of the words here, and that is especially found within the title track of Misleading. Even within the first track of The Death and the Birth, but birth spelled with an E as opposed to an I, it's just the little things like that that really make it a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more of that, I don't know, a little bit to sweeten the pot, shall we say. The first couple of songs, The Birth and the Death and their procession, these guys really felt like they were from the Mars Volta. They definitely have that same kind of a rhythmic style where it's just in your face. There's a couple of blasts and then we get into more of a slower piece and then a couple of blasts and then more of the slower piece. Where the first album there was a lot more of that Radiohead and more of that mellow piece. This we start off right off the get-go as being a very boom and really bombastic thing. And of course, we're revisiting a lot of those themes as well, and a lot of the themes I heard from Act 4. These themes, again, will reoccur throughout, and I like that not only have they been introduced, but now they're starting to be played with. So we were introduced to them in parts 1, but they're also being aired out. They're being taken a look at from a different angle and a different style. And about the first 5 songs on this album are definitely a longer stretch of music, and this is where that revisiting of themes happen, and I love where all these sounds go and what they do. We get, again, reintroduced with the lake and the river. We're getting introduced again and again with kind of that fire atmosphere and that burning tone. I mean, I just want to talk about the third song of the lake and the river. This song goes very all over the place, and it's kind of that centerpiece of this first quarter of the album, coming in at just over 9 minutes. Where this song goes is very, very interesting, at least within the scope of the story. And for the longest time, I thought that this song was actually 2 or 3 different songs, but now looking at the track list, I see that it is one song. I like how they end this song with like a railroad working song that then blends right into the Oracle on the Delphi Express, which makes perfect sense seeing as it had ended off with that railroad working song. Again, that blending of being that brutality right at the beginning of the song and then kind of going into the middle section with a very mellow and a very atmospheric sense of the song, and then coming out with more of like a fun time atmosphere. And it kind of mirrors where this song is going as well. Again, within the overall story. Near the beginning, it's very brutal and it's very heart-wrenching for this character. And so, you know, this is when the action is happening. And then in the middle section, it's when he's starting to grieve, he's starting to figure out what's going on. And then in the second step, he's moving on, he's going forward within his life. So I like how that music is able to blend perfectly within the style of the narrative story. Into the middle section. Song 6 and 7 are the Bittersweets, part 1, 2, and 3. And actually, this is probably my favorite part of the album, is this Bittersweet section. Within the first couple, this is more of like a melodramatic or a melancholy style of music, and I guess that's kind of that bittersweet. I mean, just part 1 is that definitely more of a reflection. It's more of a grieving atmosphere, and I like just how emotional the singing is on this track, and that's really where I find, at least within the Deer Hunter, where it really shines is just that emotion that the lead singer is able to elicit here. the second part of the song, part 2. It's a little bit more of a fun atmosphere. I don't know if that really diminishes a little too much, but definitely part 3 of song number 7 of The Embrace. This is where, I mean, this is my favorite song off of the album by far. Just that opening lyric of darkness, hesitation. It really puts you into the mindset of this character, and it really sets that stage for what's going on. And when he's finally belting out that line near the midsection of this song, it builds up, and we have that release near the end. I love that. Within that playing style, I like how it kind of leads out as an echo, leading us into the 8th song of The Smiling Swine. This is a very, very happy song, and it definitely has that kind of juxtaposition of the rest of the album. And so the next couple of songs within this next stretch, I almost feel like this second half, you know, from about song 8 onward, feels very much like the same kind of part that kind of wicks and wanes a little bit. But I'm gonna draw focus more towards song 12 of Where the Road Parts, because it feels very much like almost an Angels and Airwaves tune. The one thing that I really like is that image of, oh my gosh, what have we done, darling, put back on your clothes type of a thing. And I really like how that is presented, because you can both take this literally, where, you know, he's kind of given up his innocence, not necessarily sexually, but just emotionally, where he's kind of contemplating, oh my gosh, what have we done? But then getting into that, dear, put back on your clothes. You know, he's finally become intimate with somebody, and somebody has finally become intimate with him. And now that he's seen somebody for what they really are, he wants them to put back on that disguise. He wants them to put back on that clothing that people just see in the natural world. So it is that kind of loss of innocence. I think this part in particular is where the real loss of innocence is. So being blended in more of an Angels and Airways kind of a feel of music, it definitely plays a very interesting kind of dynamic there. You know, this loss of innocence, but in a very innocent-like tone of music. I thought that was really well done. Oh my God, what have I done? The last 3 songs of Dear Misleading, Black Sandy Breaches, and The Vital Vessels Vindicate. These are definitely the final act of part 2. And Dear Misleading kind of reprises that same essence that the first couple of songs had, where it sounds very much like that Mars Volta. I mean, these songs are fantastic, but the main problem that I find is because this album is so long, I do start to wander about this point. And so I almost have to start at the Bittersweet and work my way through the album from there if I'm going to really dive into these tracks. Unlike the first one where it was under an hour, this guy is over quite substantially an hour, and so because of that I am drawn out of these songs a little bit, which is a shame because these 3 songs are quite a treat in terms of the music that they are presenting. Just how this album ends with that last song of just being a very simple piano kind of on the airways, you know, somebody's walking along the beach kind of reflecting about what's going on. So I like how this album is ended. It does end on a little bit more of a depressing note than what it had started off with, but I guess that's just life, you know, that's just where you go. Overall, I do have to say I thoroughly enjoyed this album. It has some beautiful, beautiful works on it. It's about the same level as the first one. The first one had a little bit of bumps and scrapes, and I wish that it was a bit longer. This one definitely has a lot more music on it, but I think it also kind of falters because of just being overblown and oversaturated with that music. Overall, I definitely have to say, like the first one, you've got to pick this up if you can. You can find it, pick it up. It's a great album to have. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's got some beautiful, beautiful moments on it. And that's about it. So what did you guys think of Act 2 from The Deer Hunter? Let me know by commenting below. This was quite the long one. I hope to have part 3 up soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.